Hi, I'm Dave, founder of Halloween Year Round, and I've got something really, really cool for you guys today. So, you all remember that new Shudder movie, Destroy All Neighbors? My wife Jess and I just reviewed it here on the channel. It's a great movie. It's a lot of fun. If you haven't seen it yet, what are you waiting for? Well, the screenwriter of that movie, Charles A. Pieper, was cool enough to sit down and talk with me about the movie, about some of the other work he's done, and just about, horror movies we both like and crazy neighbor stories we both had. He's a really, really cool guy, and I really, really appreciate him taking the time to talk to me and here with us on the channel. So definitely check out this interview. It's really, really cool. And did you know that Halloween Year Round now has a Patreon? It's a great way to support the channel. One of the perks you get is every month my wife and I record an audio commentary of us watching and bickering about a movie, and who doesn't like that? So be sure to check that out. And without further ado, here's my interview with Charles A. Pieper.
All right, so I'm here with Charles A. Pieper. Thank you
Hello.
so much for joining us. A fellow P last name that you were just saying people have trouble pronouncing right.
Oh yeah, it's been a lifelong journey.
It's all right. It's all right. So, here to talk about Destroy All Neighbors, the first Shudder original movie of 2024. I feel like that's a big deal. It kicks off kind of their lineup for the whole year.
Absolutely, man. We're starting off the new year with a blast, with a bang, with a madness. It's yeah, it's a thrill. We can get into that later, but I'm happy that this is the timing that happened because it's like new year, fuck you, crazy film. You either love it or you hate it, in your face. Blah, blah,
It
it's great.
sets the tone for everything that is to come.
Mm-hmm.
So tell me a little bit about yourself. So you co-wrote the screenplay for it.
Yeah, well, so I started writing this script for the director Josh Forbes 10 years ago.
Oh
I
wow.
was, I know, things take a long, long time in general when making movies, especially if you're trying to make a gonzo, weird ass film like this with no money to start. But what happened was I had a really intense, loud neighbor lived right behind me. I'm right here. This is the wall. This is where it began.
Oh, that's the wall itself. It's where
Yeah.
you live now.
I'm still there. And it is literally just a funny coincidence that the art designer and set creator of Destroy All Neighbors painted William's set the same color green as my actual apartment. They did not know that, and it makes it very wild. When I watch the film, not only does Jonah kind of look like me, but the apartment looks like my anyway. But yeah, I had a really rough, this neighbor was he was a cokehead. He was an alcoholic. He'd have ragers. He'd have orgies. He kept me up all night blaring EDM and 80s music, which was a weird combo. So I started complaining to Josh. He was a music video director and a friend of mine. I had done stop motion animation for him. I used to be strictly a stop motion animator before moving into live action writing and directing. And so, yeah, I was just unloading on him about this asshole. And he was like, dude, I have a neighbor who's driving me nuts too. He had a neighbor who like bang on the wall and be like, "I'm gonna kill your children. I'm gonna kill," like, and we lived in the same neighborhood, so it's just a bad. Anyway, we thought it would be more beneficial to kill our neighbors on the page than in real life. So we just started writing this almost as like a joke between friends, you know? He was like, "Well, Charlie, I've done more professional music video directing. You've done more writing. Let's combine on
It
this.
was
Maybe
the
we'll get it
perfect
made."
marriage.
Took a decade. And yeah, we did end up getting it made. It took a long time and it evolved greatly over the course of that decade. We had two other wonderful writers come on and push the humor to the actors. We can go into more details with that if need be, but the end result is this beautiful mind meld of me and Josh and Mike Benner and Jared Logan, the two other writers, as well as Jonah Ray Rodriguez and Alex Winter, who not only acted in it, but ended up producing it and helped get it made. It's been the thrill of my life. I am who I am because of Freaked and seeing that film as a kid in the 90s and seeing that film again and again and wearing that VHS down into the ground. And the fact I started writing something that ended up appealing to Alex Winter enough to return to prosthetic gonzo weirdo acting, it's a thrill. The film came out last week. I feel like my life has become the final scene of Pee-wee's Big Adventure. I'm watching myself on the screen more or less played by Jonah, and it's just like, it's been wonderful. So
I'm sure it's very surreal, and I feel like everyone has a crazy neighbor story, like, and everyone
dude, yeah.
can relate to that.
I think so too. We've all had crazy bad neighbors. We've all probably been crazy bad neighbors. If anything, I've become the loud crazy neighbor because I love the soundtrack to my movie so much by my favorite band, pretty much, Ryan Katner and Brett Morris of Man Man. I'm playing it loud. I'm stomping around. I don't know if the woman below me knows I had a movie come out. She's probably plotting to kill me right now. So
She's writing her own movie about you.
destroy all Charlies.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's wild, man. I highly recommend the use of art to process trauma and then turn into something funnier than the real thing, because life sucks, right? Like, let's have some fun with it if we can. Yeah. That's sort of my, I guess, modus operandi. And I think it's why I like horror, because a lot of times people would ask me, like, why are you so into horror? And I'm like, because I have a window. Like, I look outside, I see the state of the world. But then if you're the one coming up with the horror, like, you're controlling the narrative. And Destroy All Neighbors is silly as hell. It's completely dumb. But I also think it is intentionally heartfelt. And the weirdo message at the core of it is, you know, don't be so full of yourself that you ignore the fact that everyone could be a friend. Everyone could be a neighbor, yeah, William, a lot of the more negative reviews have been funny because you're like, that main character is the biggest piece of shit I've ever seen. He's such a dick. Meow, meow, meow. And I'm
It's like,
like,
that's the point.
thank you, my friend. Yeah. And maybe I'm a little partial to him because he's an exaggerated version of myself, but okay, whatever. We don't have to get into the weeds about that too much.
Well, this isn't a therapy session, don't worry.
Thank you.
No, but William, I definitely, it was oddly inspiring in that, how many of us kind of get in our own way of what we want, and then it's so
Yeah.
easy to blame, oh, well, it's my girlfriend's fault because of this, or oh, it's my neighbor's fault because of this, or oh, it's
Yeah.
my boss's fault because of this, and we don't pursue our dreams.
For sure. And I mean, I'll tell you this though, like when it takes 10 years to get your first feature film made, and it's a film about someone trying to finish something and not being able to, oh, it's the Ouroboros. It's you kind of go crazy. But I think that obsessive tenacity led to a better result. Like Jonah has been on board this film, I want to say, for 7 or 8 years.
Oh,
And that was a
wow.
similar thing. When I initially wrote it for Josh Forbes, we didn't have Jonah attached, but towards the end of the first year or two of me writing, he was like, I really think Jonah Ray would be cool for this. Let me, I think I have his email. I worked with him once. And to Jonah's credit, he liked the script and he was like, yeah, you can say I'm attached. And if you ever get money, we'll make it. Still took forever, but
But
yeah.
it's a step.
Mm-hmm.
And then at what point did Alex Winter get involved? You said that he also helped produce it.
Oh yeah, he is an angel. This film wouldn't exist without him, straight up. He's the main the cherry on top of the pie, right? Or cake. So Jonah got attached and we sent the script around town and nobody cared. It was the typical, this is too silly to be scary, or this is too bloody to be a comedy. We got a ton of, this feels like the 80s. Nobody likes the 80s. 80s aren't popular. Nobody makes films or TV about the
Who
80s.
was saying the 80s weren't popular?
This was before Stranger Things came out. That's how long ago this was.
Oh,
So
I see.
I was ahead of the curve, right? So it kind of just faded to the background, and Jonah focused on, he got Mystery Science Theater shortly after this. And then Josh was doing music videos. I spent about half a decade developing a really crazy live action horror short called Malika Straka that Gabe Bartalos, who did the effects for Destroy, he also did the puppets for that short because I used to work for him. We were friends at his effects studio. And then, as you might remember, a little thing happened in 2020 called the pandemic and the quarantine. And it was during the early days of the quarantine. We're all stuck. Nobody could hang out. You couldn't make films. It fucking sucked. Like, I don't think I have to remind you how much that was a problem in the world. And during that time, Jonah kind of got an itch to resurrect the script. And one night, he pressed play on Bill and Ted 3, and lo and behold, there was Alex Winter as prisoner Bill, head to toe prosthetics, like this tiny muscle man. And this light bulb went off in Jonah's mind. He was like, oh my God, what if we got
our
Alex
blood.
Winter? Yep. And so he had kind of become a little friendly with Alex just because they coincidentally lived in and around the same neighborhood in LA.
So
And
they
he
themselves were neighbors.
yes, yes, that's something we can get into more. They literally, if they found out they were. And so he sent it to him and he was like, "Hey, I got the script. It's crazy. It's kind of like Freaked. We'd love if you're interested, maybe you could help produce it. We could use like, Alex Winter Presents. And then, if you really like, maybe you could be Vlad." And he read the script and he found it intriguing and silly. He wasn't initially sure he wanted to do Vlad. He had to really think about it. But then a week later, he emailed Jonah back and was like, "Of course I have to be Vlad, let's do this." And then with Alex Winter and Jonah Ray attached, we sent it to Shudder and they bought it. They bought it outright. So Shudder funded it entirely. It's a Shudder original, and mad props to Shudder. They funded us and they let us do it. They didn't pester us. They didn't, "Well, what about this? What about that? Is this too silly?" It was still a very tight shoot, and everyone cranked it to 11 to get this thing done. We had only 20 days to shoot this film
Oh,
with
wow.
a small budget, a little bigger than some streaming films, but honestly, to comfortably do it, like another week and more money would have helped. So it was hot, it was gnarly. We were shooting it in August during a 2 week long heat wave where it was over 100 degrees every day, and Alex Winter is covered in rubber. It was a tough shoot, but everyone had so much fun because I don't think it's a surprise to say it's so rare for really weird ass films like this to get made at all. So everyone involved really did their best. And I think the end result, yeah, I think it stands out. I mean, mad props to William Stone, the cinematographer, because like a lot of time comedies just, they're funny, but they're just lit bright. And we were like, dude, when Josh sent this to Jonah, he was like, "It's like Delicatessen meets Barton Fink meets Evil Dead 2." And I want it to look like a genre movie. It does. And I'm very happy about that. Gabe Bartalos, who designed Vlad and all the creatures, he's a legendary. I grew up watching his stuff. He did Basket Case 2 and 3. He did Brain Damage. He was on Gremlins 2. He designed fucking Leprechaun for Warwick Davis. This guy is a golden god. And then helping Gabe out, we had Bill Corso, who is an Academy Award-winning effects artist who's been friends and worked with Alex Winter since they were like 20. He did Lost Boys.
Oh,
He did
wow.
Freaked. He did Bill and Ted 3. The film he finished working on like 2 or 3 days before he came on to Destroy All Neighbors was the new Indiana Jones. Like that, when you have two of the best practical effects guys in the world, yeah, it helps. And everyone else was like, "Whoa," everyone's like, "We're gonna do this," and we did.
So Vlad, you would say, is a distant cousin of Leprechaun.
Oh, I mean, yeah, and it's funny, some people reviewing it who don't know Gabe's name are like, "This guy looks like a big leprechaun." I'm like, "Yeah, he does."
That's
But yeah, a lot of the more negative reviews, the things they like are still my favorite parts of the film, and like I'm like, okay, and also it's baked into the film that this is you're gonna like it or you're not, and that's the central metaphor.
Mhm.
I look, not to break the internet's bubble, I'm not prog is not my favorite type of music. I'm
I
way
was gonna
more.
ask about that.
Sorry,
I
we're
I
jumping ahead.
I am the uninitiated, so I'm
Mm.
actually not really.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
more a classic rocker, like
yeah.
70s, 80s,
I'm right there
90s.
with you. I'm a big new wave guy. My favorite band is Sparks. I love Talking Heads, David Byrne, Oingo Boingo fucking rocks.
Mhm.
Man Man, who is in my movie. They're great, Philadelphia boys. So Prague, the reason we went with Prague is because it makes sense as a comical metaphor for creativity, where like your brain's going into hyperdrive and you're trying to put every idea you want. It might not work. And it's funny. And so many of the bad reviews are like, "Prague sucks. These assholes like Prague." And I'm like, get some media literacy in your brain, you little silly Billy. Like it's a metaphor. It's comedy. It's supposed to be funny. With that being said, I do really like the Mars Volta. Deloused in the Comatorium is an
Mhm.
all-timer for me. When that dropped, and I was at like end of middle school, maybe high school, I listened to that and that blew my mind. I do like them. So
Would you say prog is like the jazz of rock? That like
yeah,
not everybody gets it, and I say that from
yeah.
experience. My stepdad is a drummer,
Oh,
huge
okay.
jazz fan,
Yeah.
and he's kind of a music snob. Like it's jazz and everything else for him.
Dude, yeah, no, and there is a stereotype that a lot of people who are really into prog rock are like that. and we played on that. But yeah, I don't know. I'm more into punk. My uncle was the first manager of Bad Brains back in DC in the 80s. Like, it was the
Mhm.
coolest thing anyone in my family's ever done. Yeah, I don't really listen to prog rock. But I've been listening to the hell out of the soundtrack to this movie. So Brett Morris and Ryan Katner, they literally did 100 individual unique sound cues for this 85-minute long film because it's so
That's
chock-a-block.
impressive. It's like a whole album.
So, well, they've released the album on Sub Pop Records, but because they're really juvenile jokesters, they decided to whittle down the 100 tracks to 69. So
Of
our
course.
soundtrack has 69 tracks and it's available everywhere online and you can buy it from the website. And will there eventually be a limited edition vinyl release? Yes, it might.
I review horror movies all the time. I try to judge a movie based on what is its objective.
Thank you. Yeah.
Obviously, Destroy All Neighbors is going to have a different objective than Killers of the Flower Moon.
Just a little
Very
bit though.
different
Yeah.
goals, different types,
We tried to get, Scorsese in for a cameo at the end, but like he was just like, "Nah, man, I just did that in my movie. We're cool. Love you, buddy, but bye." No, for sure. And that's also an interesting thing is a lot of negative reviews in general are like, I really thought this movie would be like this. It wasn't. That's not the movie's fault.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
why?
your problem.
Also, I gotta say, Shudder has done a delightful job of marketing this. And anyone who saw our trailer and then didn't like the movie, the trailer is exactly the tone of the movie. It's just like, come on.
No,
But,
I've seen it all over YouTube.
I've been seeing some of the YouTube
Yeah.
reviews, and there have been some really funny bad ones, and there's been some really great ones. Like I came across yours, and again, if I had a thinner skin, I'd stay away from that. But I'll tell you what, when you try to make a movie for 10 years and it doesn't happen, and then it does happen, the fact that anyone's talking about it, good or bad, it's kind of exciting.
It becomes a
But yeah, they're
superpower. That thick
thank you.
skin,
Yeah. But yeah, though there was this big YouTube group. They're called like the Angry Grumpy Reviewers or something, and it's three muscle-bound bros that look like Vlad, right? And they had like an hour and they hated it. I watched about half of it before I was like, okay, that's enough. But they were like, that fucking William, man, he's a piece of shit. What a dweeb, what a nerd. We loved Vlad though. Vlad was the only cool part. We fucking should have seen the beekeeper, Jason Statham. And I'm like, this film is definitely not for you guys. But hey,
that
you know
makes
what
a
I
lot
mean?
of sense. They identified with Vlad. That's sort of the
Dude, right?
what's that meme? The you missed the point of the movie by
Oh,
identifying with like
yeah.
Patrick Bateman, the Joker, Alex from Clockwork
Yeah.
Orange.
Look, it has an 80s vibe just because it's practical effects, but it's not an 80s movie. It's explicitly about the modern day dilemma of people our age having to rent because there's no money and maybe never getting out of an apartment, never getting out of the rut they're in creatively. It's now, and there's a lot more we could play around with in terms of going forward and the nowness of it and going back in time with the 70s prog rock and seeing it for real, right? So yeah, it's a fertile ground. And dude, if there could be, there's what, 4 Ghoulies movies? By the way, I love Ghoulies. I literally have a full-scale Ghoulie puppet out of frame here and my homemade Ghoulie there. Yeah, there could be a couple
I
Destroy
was
All
gonna say
Neighbors.
there's no way you're not a Ghoulies fan. Just
Dude,
just based on like the stop motion creatures and the
yeah,
puppets and all that.
honestly, I have many scripts I've written and things I want to pitch to Shudder and elsewhere, but I kind of want to lead with a Ghoulies idea. I have a sequel idea that would be not a reboot, but kind of a modern comic update of it. And like, yeah, man, dude, I made a Ghoulies drawing children's book when I was in kindergarten after I saw it, like hand drawn, redid the plot of Ghoulies. Like, that's how deep I go with them. So.
That's devotion. So, but besides Ghoulies, what are some other of your kind of like horror inspirations that got you into writing?
What's interesting is like I love Freaked, I love Evil Dead 2, all this silly stuff. Josh Forbes loves it even more than me. On my own, I tend to lean a little bit more serious, a little bit more bleak. I love David Cronenberg. I love David Lynch. My stuff is a little bit more body horror, a little bit more psychological.
Mhm.
If you really want to give yourself a whiplash of the mind after you've seen Destroy All Neighbors, watch my short film Malika Straka. It's on Vimeo. It's bleak. It's fucked up. It'll hurt you. Like I like, a little bit of A24, right? And then a little bit of like Vestron video. The extremes interest me. But yeah, I have a body horror script based off medical issues I had as a kid or as a teenager. When I was in college, I was accidentally overdosed on Accutane, that really heavy
Oh,
dude. You know what, right? Like,
I
okay,
remember. Yeah.
people died, people went insane from this. I nearly died. And so that's a script I have where imagine all your most awkward moments of freshman year of college mixed with Cronenberg's The Fly, right?
Mhm.
So everything I write has to be personal, even if it's exaggerated beyond the pale. And then I have things like there's this one thing I want to do eventually that's a comedy drama called The Old Wolves Club about elderly werewolves. So that's kind of more sweet. That's maybe the most Amblin entertainment of my ideas. But yeah, I got a lot of darkness. But I gotta say, I was pursuing the heavy darkness for years because that's I was, purging it out of my life. And also that's been the dominant form of horror cinema for about a decade. The A24, like everything is the horror is trauma, right? The monster is a metaphor for
Mhm.
trauma. But you know what? After the pandemic and all of us being traumatized and trapped for 2 years, I kind of came out the other side and wanted to push for Destroy All Neighbors even harder. Like, why not have some fucking fun for a change? So I don't know. I'm kind of halfway in between, but I'm also like, if I get to do any of whichever idea of mine they want to buy is what I'll do next. So,
That's spoken like a true filmmaker.
thank you. Yeah, I
No, but
know.
but horror I think has always been a reflection of, the fears and
Hmm.
anxieties at the time. You go back to like the 50s monster movies were about
Hmm.
the fear of the atomic bomb.
Yeah,
You get to,
yeah,
the 70s and the ultra violent images coming back from Vietnam
yeah,
gives
yeah.
way to the dawn of the slasher.
Yeah, I like that because it's like the dark reflection of a culture and you can chart it. And I think that's beautiful. And it's such a huge umbrella of a genre that you could have something as silly and bonkers as Destroy All Neighbors in the same overarching field as something, say, like as psychologically resonant and dark as like the Babadook. I
Mhm.
have the book. I bought that limited edition pop-up book replica. It's over there. Like, yeah, horror is just everything to me, I think.
It,
Yeah.
it it is a really cool umbrella, and it's something that, even my wife, who, she's been on the channel with me before,
Yeah.
even she sometimes says to me, she's like, Dave, don't you get tired of horror? And I'm like, no, you don't understand.
Yeah.
There's
Yeah.
such a wide, like, today I'm knee deep in, werewolves and vampires, and then tomorrow it's
Yeah.
exorcism and possession, and then it's,
Hell yeah. What was the
eight.
first horror film you remember seeing, like back in the day, like sneaking it as a kid, or like what got you into this? I'm always curious
So
about
I
that.
I owe my initiation to horror completely to Chucky.
Hell yeah, I love
Chucky,
Chucky.
I
Yeah.
was I was I was a kid of the 80s, grew up in the 90s,
Hmm.
and I was terrified of Chucky. I think I
Mm.
saw the cover of Child's Play 2, the one where he's
With
holding
the
the scissors.
yeah, I remember seeing that in the video store and on the back of comic books
Mhm.
because I bought comics as a kid and it was coming out that year and it was all oh there it was. Yeah.
That freaked me the hell out. And I
Yeah.
had a My Buddy doll
Okay.
that my mom
Yeah.
got me, and I thought
Oh
he was going to
boy.
come to life and kill me. And
That's
then
fucking wild.
years later, my mom said, Dave, why didn't you ever tell me that you were scared? And I said, because then he would know, and then he would definitely kill me. That was my logic
No,
as like
that's
a
solid
5-year-old.
child logic. Yeah.
But then that
Cool.
fear of Chucky, by the time I'm like 8 or 9,
Hmm.
that fear starts to turn into a fascination. And then
Yeah.
I go down that rabbit hole. And
I
yeah,
love it. I
I owe
feel
it all
that
to Chucky.
similar. I've been obsessed with horror and monsters since I was a kid. And my parents are kind of goofy. They're theater people. They're creative. So they let me watch this shit. They would fast forward the adult bits, but the rest was good
Yeah.
to go because I was so aware of special effects from an early age. They'd be kind of creeped out, and I'd be like, "Oh, it's just a rubber doll filled with raw meat," And yeah,
So I know you talked about this a little bit, just in kind of the shooting schedule. What would you say the biggest challenge was? You've talked about shooting. What about writing it?
Writing was a very interesting process because, again, so I spent maybe a year and a half, 2 years writing the first drafts just by myself, but with the input and back and forth with the director, Josh Forbes. And those initial drafts were darker, a little gnarlier, stinkier, bleaker, because I was literally writing them during the day while being kept up at night by the actual neighbor. So like I was living in it and I was really pushing my anxiety onto the page.
It was
And
therapeutic.
yes. But that doesn't always mean, just exercising your own personal demons doesn't mean it'll be entertaining to other people on a wide scale. So when we sent that script to Jonah, he clicked with the vibe and the idea, but he was like, you know what if we bring on a punch-up comedy writer to kind of push the main character more to my sensibilities, to my humor, and we just kind of make it a little goofier because there's so much fun that could be had with it. And I didn't have like an asshole ego about it. I was like, yeah, if we get it rewritten so an actor feels comfortable and it's more funny, like this guy's on MST3K. Like, I'm not going to be like, how dare you touch my script? And the guy they brought on, Mike Benner, he wrote for Bob's Burgers, right? So I'm not about to be like, no, no, no. So Mike brought the prog rock. That was his idea, as
Oh,
I
I
think.
see.
And Joe, because Joan is a punk rock musician on top of being a comedian. He's in this Weird Al cover band that does punk versions of Weird Al songs. So Mike then went on and did new drafts, kind of pushing it towards that. And he wrote those by himself. We weren't stepping on each other's toes. We'd email back and forth a little. So he spent maybe another year or two making it into kind of this prog rock version of my original thing. Same character, same plot, just new veneer, right? New varnish on top of the piece of wood. And then nobody cared anyway still. So it went into hibernation and got resurrected and sent to Alex Winter. And then Alex Winter was like, I love this script, but it's a couple years old now. Maybe we get some new blood in it. So he brought on, or them as a group brought on the second punch-up writer, Jared Logan. And he's a stand-up comedian, writes for late night. And he added a lot of the callback jokes and kind of, seeding things in the first act that are getting the third. So, and once again, he solely wrote by himself during the quarantine years, so we couldn't even hang out. So it's this weird synthesis of all three of us individually building this stew of a movie.
And in the end, I definitely noticed those callbacks, particularly Caleb Bang Jansen saying you'd have to tie me up to listen to this music.
Yeah. It's all callbacks, and I think that's very funny. And if we get to do more, there'll be even bigger callback jokes between films, which will be fucking hysterical. Oh my God.
Well,
Also, all of it will be cool if we get to do more. We shall see.
We shall see. Before we wrap up, kind of on the subject of that, is there anything you're working on right now that you can tell us about?
Yeah. I'm developing a re-edit, possibly, of an old failed animal rights documentary I shot on mini DV camera as a teenager in the summer of 2006. This is something I'm doing more or less just for myself, but maybe will come out. We'll see. It's just sort of a fun re-editing project, reclaiming part of my history that I think for a long time I just pushed aside. And then beyond that, I'm finishing up a draft of a new script based off the true story of a 19th century eccentric German inventor named Joseph Faber, who created a singing talking machine called the Euphonia that had a rubber woman's face in the front that it spoke and sang out of. And this poor inventor thought if he made it look more human, it would be more appealing. But of course, it just made it creepy. He inadvertently created the first example in human history of the uncanny valley effect. And he toured the world with it, and everyone was creeped out, and he went insane and killed himself. Lovely fun for the whole family stuff.
That's a hell of a story. How have I not heard of this?
Because it's a deep cut of weird shit. But I like the idea of doing a period piece biopic, not about a famous guy or someone who got it right, but someone who really got it wrong. And I'm leaning hard into the psychosexual aspects of a man creating a rubber woman's face that talks, okay? Like, we're getting Cronenberg with this. It's gross. I'm writing this in coffee shops here in LA and looking over my shoulder because I don't want them to see what I'm reading and writing about. Like, it's that gross. It's awesome. So yeah, I got a lot of things in the fire, and we'll see what happens. Yeah.
Well, that sounds really cool. And then where can people find you?
I am on Instagram at Pieper, CPIEPER. I'm on Twitter at Inherent Charlie. I'm probably more on Twitter than I should be, but I try to be nice about it. I have fun. I still have fun there. And you can see a lot of my old backlog of short films and animations on my website, which is straight up just www.charlespiper.com.
All right. Well, thank you so much for joining us.
No, thank you for having me.
Everybody, if you haven't already, check out Destroy All Neighbors. It is streaming on Shudder. It's a great movie. It is it's my favorite Shudder movie of the year, and I know that it's just the beginning, but I think it's gonna stay that way.
I hope so. That'll be cool. Yeah, we shall see. But
it would shock me if something like it's gonna be in my top 10 horror movies of the year. I'm calling it now.
Hell yeah. Thank you, buddy.
All right,
Thank you so much for watching that, guys. Thanks again to Charles for being such a cool guy and, agreeing to this interview. I'm definitely going to link all of his socials and links in the description below. Definitely check him out, follow him, see his other work. Like, share, subscribe, all the YouTube stuff. If you don't, you may end up with a creepy neighbor like Vlad, who lives in your head rent-free. And, as always, every day is Halloween.